You're listening to Keith Engle, the host of TGI Sports Talk on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel. National Streaming Sports is brought to you in part by BetUs.com, designed for true fans. NFL odds, Week 1 and futures, college football odds, including Heisman Trophy favorites and playoff odds, NBA odds of division winners and playoffs, Major League Baseball playoff and World Series odds, National Hockey League conference playoffs and Stanley Cup odds, and boxing wagers. Betting opportunities include versus the spread and outright winners, also during the game. Use our link on our website, nessp.info. The Bet Us Opportunities webpage for a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits. Must be 21 years old and remember, bet responsibly.
Good evening, everybody. Whoa, geez, the voice a little raspy there. Good evening, everybody. Keith Engle here for TGI Sports Talk's College Football Huddle. How's everybody doing tonight? We had a full slate of games last week. My gosh, what a lot of stuff to talk about today. We'll get into the brand new top 25, and there are some big changes. Florida State, who I spent all last week on all the shows saying, don't count them out because they lost, their first game. By the way, trying to fix something there. I hate that little wobble in the screen. They played a worse game than they played in Ireland against Georgia Tech last week against Bill O'Brien's Boston College Eagles, and they fall out of the top 25 there and even in the honorable mentions, guys. So they've fallen by the wayside. Georgia is just dominant. Georgia, I have no doubts Georgia's that good. We know how I feel about the Georgia Bulldogs, but is Clemson as bad as they look? Dabo Swinney's got to change his approach. USC surprises LSU, and there's nobody to blame but the coaches staff. They had this game in hand. Brian Kelly's in a press conference slamming on the table like the players are at fault. We're celebrating on the sideline. Well, you're calling passes when you late in the game when you get a chance to put the game away. Notre Dame in an ugly game at Texas A&M finds a way to win. I think Notre Dame's running the table, guys. This Florida State team's not beating them. I don't think that USC team's beating them. Now the USC's, and I'm sorry, Danny, if you're with me already. USC's defense was much better. Not a lot of pressure on the quarterback, but much better. And Miami just hammers Florida. A great game by Cam Ward. If you watch this game, you saw what a great athlete he was. But Florida's not that good. So I've actually got Florida A&M and Miami as one of my games to watch this week because this is where Miami historically meaning the last 7 or 8 years, they come up small. So anyway, we'll talk about all that stuff. We'll get into the top 25. We'll take your comments and on anything your teams didn't do. Dave Guyette, great. I think a great start for Syracuse. I know they played Lehigh. Fran Brown with a great start to his Syracuse coaching tenure. McCord played great, had 4 touchdowns and 400. I want to say it might have been 400 yards passing. Or close to it. Great game, but his first game after transferring in from Ohio State. I expect really good things out of Syracuse this year, Dave. So keep an eye on that, by the way. Listen, this ACC is going to be wide open. Wide open. Boston College, I don't know how good they are. We're going to find out how good Syracuse is this week. They're going to get Georgia Tech coming into the Carrier Dome. We'll look at some of those games as we go through as well. Get your cheesies and root beers out, Chris F. Graves says. It's time for college football talk. Cheesies. What is that, by the way? Is that like cheese doodles or Cheetos? What are cheesies, Chris? I think that's Canadian for something. I probably know what it is. No, and root beer, no real beer, just water tonight. I had a rough weekend, man. I'm 64 years old. I was out to dinners. I was out till after 11 o'clock twice this weekend. That's like 4 a.m. for me, by the way. Great concert, by the way, Sunday night. I think I told you guys on the Sunday Stream of Consciousness, we're going to see Walker Hayes at SPAC. We had a great time. CA, how you doing, buddy? Good job with the football draft. By the way, I got to tell you, I know it's professional football, but the fantasy football draft we did last night, CA, I guarantee you there's at least 3 teams, maybe 4, that did not participate in that draft, and I'm wondering if they're not in the league. Just saying. Nothing we can do about it now, but if you take a look at the picking guys that weren't even on teams, I think the computers had taken over. So I don't know about Carlos. I don't know about Nick Bodkins. I don't know about Scotty Colby. Scott Colby might be here tonight. We can ask him if he's in, and maybe they can get in and still get in and fix those teams. But unfortunately, hopefully everybody gets to play them. AC, you have no idea, man. But the problem is I'm a party animal for about 3 days, and actually that's a lot. It's 1 day, and then I need about 2 weeks off. Oh, anyway, college football, guys. Notre Dame. Chris is right with me. I've looked in Florida. But what is it? What's my hand on the pan with Florida? First of all, this is similar to, it's similar to Miami. And again, I root for Miami because of family obligations. I shouldn't say that. I've come to have an affinity for the Hurricanes. And Florida State a little bit. These teams think that they're blue bloods. They're not blue bloods. Florida, similar to Miami. I always say Miami had a great heyday from around 1982 to 2002, 83 to 2003, whatever it was, 2004. 20-year span, they were great. They haven't even sniffed a national championship in 20 years. So they had a 20-year run. That's not a blue blood. Florida, pretty much the same thing. When Steve Spurrier got there, built them into a national champion. Then they had some down years, and Urban Meyer gets there. So they had pretty good teams from the early to mid-90s through 2010. That's not a blue blood. People in Florida think they're a blue blood. This is the problem. You can't keep cycling through coaches. And Billy Napier is going to be the next one to go. Watch out for them this week. They've got, did I write down who they got? They've got a group of 5 team. There's some good games outside of, top 25 matchups this week. Let me see who Florida's got this week. Hang on 1 second. Where are you, Florida? I know you're here somewhere. You know what? Probably easier to go to the standings and do it that way. They've got a tough test this week. Billy Napier, they lose this game. Billy Napier's getting fired. He may get fired this week. You can't. They got Sanford. Sorry. I don't know. I guess it wasn't. It must have been somebody else I saw had a decent. Well, there are a couple teams with group of 5 teams. Boise State goes to Utah. App State goes to Clemson. Big games. But that's the thing. The thing is, the Florida fans have got an overestimation of how good their program really is. They're not a blue blood like USC, Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, Nebraska, good for decades and decades and decades. Even Notre Dame, and they all have their lulls, don't get me wrong. But Florida really wasn't, part of the national conversation year after year until Steve Spurrier got there. And it's really the same way with Miami and Florida State. What's Florida State done outside of the Bobby Bowden era? Other than, Jimbo did carry it on for a few years. That's the problem in Florida. They got an overestimation. You can't keep cycling through coaches. AC has been a great addition to the group here. Excellent point, Chris. Thank you for pointing that out. You guys have we've had a lot of newcomers this past few months. Chris, you among them, and Danny, AC, and I don't want to leave other people out. JB, there's lots of guys I can name, and they aren't here for every show, but they're here. When they're here, they contribute, and we have a lot of fun. And the old timers, I shouldn't say old timers, but the long timers on this show, Rick and Kenny and Billy Pulver is traveling, not with us quite as often. But all of those guys have done a great job over the years and kept this show afloat. CA 3, but one came in after and dropped the player. Okay, well, that's good. So there's 2 we're concerned about. Excellent. That's good to know. AC, it talks about BC. AC talks about BC. But Bill O'Brien's a really good football coach. Did a great job at Penn State under really tough circumstances. Boston College, who I like to root for, they've got the Eagles home field right behind me in Cherry Hill, near Boston or outside of Boston, and I think they could be a sleeper in the ACC. There's a bunch of teams that could do well. I talked about this last week, right? I mean, again, I'm not going to just go off last week's results, but you've got Georgia Tech, you've got BC, you've got Syracuse. I'm telling you, will be pretty good. I got a newcomer in SMU, Louisville. You got Miami, you got NC State, I should say, in North Carolina. Matt Brown, I think perhaps needs to hang it up. I think Virginia Tech's probably overrated. You saw in the Vandy game yesterday. That's 7 teams, though, and I haven't even talked about Clemson or Florida State. So again, we're going to bash this league and the Big 12 because when we compared them to the SEC and the Big 10, they don't stand the test, right? But there's a lot of talent in these leagues that are going to beat each other up, and that hurts them as well. No, there's probably not. There's probably not. There's no fixing it. You know what? Here's the thing, Rick. And I don't want to get into a big conversation about this. There'll be guys that, if they're on top of things and can get the right waiver spot, there's some guys that didn't get drafted that will do well. It is what it is. I mean, guys don't get in. They don't get in. Everybody plays those teams. So, can Billy O bring BC to greatness? Greatness is a little probably too much. Respectability and consistently competitive, I think, would be enough for the BC fans. BC's had very few really great years through the years, but they've had a lot of really good years. We think back to Doug Flutie's career there. You think back to Matt Ryan's career there, who coincided with Josh Beekman, who is a local product that Rick and I know very well. But, they don't have sustained excellence, let's say. I think the best bowl game they ever played in was probably Cotton Bowl when Doug Flutie was there. But Bill O'Brien is a really good football coach. And as I said, he took over much worse circumstances at Penn State and put together a very respectable product in the 3 or 4 years he was there. And there's a thank you for Chris, and everybody's grateful. AC is here. Chris, what am I saying? AC says, Chris, I've noticed you also bring great insight to the show. Chris does bring some great insight, and I've also challenged him to bring some, what's the word? Irreverent kind of information. I hope that's the right word. And Chris brings it. I mean, he stumps me very often. Paul Spada from Wisconsin, BC fan himself, AC. Probably excited about BC's trampling of Florida State the other night. BC's got, who's BC got this week? They got a tough game this week, if I remember right. Did I write down their game? I'm surprised I didn't. Thought they had a good game. There's so many games right now. I got to get my head around these. They got Duquesne this week. Oh, come to reckoning next week, though. We're going to find out exactly how BC is very quickly, because week 3, They're going to play Missouri, number 9 Missouri, on the road. That's going to be a tough spot for BC. And if they win there or they're competitive there, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But I like Bill O'Brien. I think he's a really good coach. Speaking of Wisconsin, where Paul is, there was a couple of deceiving scores in my mind. So what was good last week? What was I surprised about? I was surprised that Miami was able to put the heat on Florida that they were. I thought they'd win the game. I didn't think they'd win by 30. Cam Ward was fabulous. But to get back to Wisconsin for a second, they played Western Michigan, I believe. That they ended up winning by a couple of touchdowns. But again, misleading. This was a one-score game in the fourth quarter. Also the Michigan game, people talk about, wow, they won by 20, where all the worries. They had 263 yards of offense, guys. With 10 minutes or 9 minutes left in the game, they were up 16-10. They ended up winning. They scored 2 more touchdowns. One of them was a pick 6, though. BC was that close to losing to Fresno at home. 263 yards of offense doesn't get it done. Michigan's going to get trampled at home by Texas this week. I just see it coming. And it's too soon for this team to have to play that type of game. And I just don't see any way that they're going to stay in this game. I'm not one who likes to lay, a touchdown or more on the road. Texas is going to thump this team, I think. I really do. Don't listen. I like BC, and I think you're talking about what I mentioned with the Missouri's really good, by the way. Missouri was good that last year. Missouri would have probably made a 12-team playoff last year. They've got a very good chance of making it this year. They bring back nearly all of their important skill players. They've got one of the best coaches that nobody knows in the country. I can't even think of his name off the top of my head. What the heck is his name? Here, I'll give it to you in just a second. Go to my cheat sheet here. God, they did a great piece on him last year too on game day. Oh yeah, Eli Drinkwitz. How do I forget Drinkwitz? Jesus, this is an exciting team to watch play football. They gave Georgia all they could handle last year. Georgia didn't end up pulling away at the end of the game last year, but this is a Missouri team with a lot of guys back. So, and by the way, this isn't going to be a big demerit for them to go to Missouri and lose. It's the 9th ranked team in the country. So, anyway, Michigan. Misleading final score. Oregon only beats Idaho by 10. Interesting. Penn State surprised me a little bit. Handled West Virginia, a long time regional rivalry, which it doesn't get played every year anymore. In Morgantown, I thought that was going to be a tougher game for Penn State, and they really played well. Alar played really well at quarterback in the new offense. Nebraska got off to a great start with a true freshman quarterback. Realia played really well. Utah, Cam Rising, really good start for him with 6 touchdowns, I believe. Arizona gets a little bit of a push in giving up 39 points on defense, but they get a freshman wide receiver with 400 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns to pull away in that game. What else surprised me during the year? Colorado. Look, at Colorado gets pushed. Don't play the Dakotas, by the way. If you're a Division I team, don't play the Dakotas. They always field competitive, tough teams. North Dakota State, South Dakota State. Don't go play those teams. Deion and company barely got by them. That team is getting, I told you, 4-8. They've got 2 of the best players in the country. Travis Hunter, it should win the Heisman Trophy in my mind. If he continues to play like he played last week, he will. You can talk about, people want to talk about Shedeur Sanders. To me, this is going to be a race between, a handful of guys. I think Cam Rising puts himself in the hunt. Carson Beck will be in the hunt. Travis Hunter will be in the hunt, and those three guys should be in New York in my mind. I'll go out on a limb and say those will be the three guys that are the finalists. But Travis Hunter is the best player in the country in my mind. Possible number 1 draft pick next year, by the way. What else surprised me? I'll get to your comments in a second as well. South Carolina barely survives last week. Not a good start for them with their new quarterback, and Shane Beamer is getting a lot of heat right now. I already talked about them. Biggest surprise, Oregon, I said. Oh, Iowa scores 40 points. That's a surprise. They got Iowa State already this week. That ought to be interesting. It's too funny. All the service academies win big last week, which is good. I already talked about Syracuse off to a nice start. McCord played really, really well. Just an exciting. It was a fun first week of football, I thought. CA Michigan still has talent. Longhorns are full, and it could be a stampede. And Michigan's talent mostly is on the other side of the football. It's not on the offensive side of the football. They got a former walk-on playing quarterback. They have not replaced Corum officially. Now, they could get better as the year goes on, but playing Texas off this game, again, they were this close to losing to Fresno State. They were ahead by 6. Fresno had the ball in the fourth quarter, trailing by less than a touchdown. And then Michigan scored 2 touchdowns, and one of them was a pick 6. Again, you can't just look at final scores and go, man, that team's really good. The Wisconsin game, I would tell you the same thing. I watched most of that game. Western Michigan gave them a really good game. Danny Fuller's the best, along with Chris F. Grave. And Paul, I didn't mention you. I'm sorry at the beginning. You're one of our newer contributors and have done a great job. And I'll just say that because you're a Patriot fan. I mean, I got more to hold against you than with you. You're also a Red Sox Celtics fan. No, listen, you, Danny, Chris, AC, great new additions, and JB, as I mentioned, and some others, which we'll see through the years. AC says Travis Knight is his favorite college football player in the country. He's the most exciting, in my mind. Just watch him play. Watch him play defense. I mean, he's so good on offense. You forget he's probably the best cornerback in the country. And I think it'd be awesome if he wins a Heisman Trophy. First, he'd be the first, and defense is his first, his number one priority, if you will. And he'd be the first guy to win it since, speaking of Michigan, Woodson won it back, probably 30 years ago. Somebody can help me out with that. Chris says University of Toronto's varsity Blues roster has quite a defensive line. Remember the name James Donald. Offense 6'8", 320 pounds. What's that? He plays offense, or is he on the defensive line? We don't hear about many of these guys from the Canadian universities coming down here to play ball. I'm sure it's happened. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, after watching Hard Knocks, the last episode of Hard Knocks is tonight. I'm looking forward to seeing it. We're going to see the cut downs. They've got a kid from Canada on their roster. He actually was playing really well early in camp and then hurt. I think he tore his hamstring, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the kid's name, but he was a very interesting character. So I'm not sure. He may get himself on the IR. Which might keep him getting paid anyway. I believe he's from Canada as well. He's still got on defense. He doesn't get thrown at, so you actually don't get to see him much on defense. That's when you know they're good. I said this about the Bland kid from the Cowboys last year when everybody made the big deal about the 2 touchdowns. He the 2 interceptions he returned for touchdowns last year on Thanksgiving Day, which is great. It's a great accomplishment. But great cornerbacks don't pick off 10 passes a season in college or the pros because nobody throws at them. Right? Desmond Howard was a wide receiver and and a special teamer. He didn't play defense. I'm thinking of not Rod Woodson, Charles Woodson. He played defensive back and played some wide receiver and returned kicks. That's the guy I'm thinking of. Desmond was a wide receiver first, special teamer second. He didn't play defense. Good try though. That's a good name in Michigan history. People forget. Watch out for Washington. Our Washington running back. I'm not sure. So there's an R Washington playing for Washington. I'm guessing you're saying here. Listen, I'm not sure about Washington this year. I mean, really good football coach in Jed Finch, former Patriot quarterback coach, did a great job, as I've said a few times, turning around Arizona the last couple of years. I think they won 1 game his first year there 3 years ago. And last year he had them in contention for the Pac-12 championship game. But he gets to a program that had 16 scholarship players left when he got there. Now, he did a pretty good job, I'm sure. He brought some kids in. He brought in he brought a quarterback in from it's escaping me now. I think he brought a running back with him from Arizona. He brought in a transfer quarterback from back east here, maybe the Southeast Conference. But 16 scholarship players left off that runner-up team last year. 20 of the 22 starters gone, either to the NFL or transferred out. It's going to be a tough job for Jed Finch. And if they finish 500 in the Big Ten this year, they'll have done well. And remember, no divisions, so you don't get to pounce on a bad Western division in the Big Ten this year. Everybody's in one. So the schedule is what it is, and you're going to play good teams some years or better teams some years than other years, but no divisions to save you and potentially get a weaker team in that conference final. Everybody pretty much of all the major conferences have gone to no divisions, and you're going to see the best 2 teams theoretically in the championship games of these conferences. Charles Woodson, thank you, CA. Really good player, by the way, and played well in the NFL as well. Michigan's produced some good NFL players. One of them was a quarterback. I can't think of his name. Number 12, I think. Ran a really slow 40 and got drafted 199th. I can't remember his name. It'll come to me. Oh, Jay Coleman, running back, Washington. I mean, that would have been fine. I think Washington starring for Washington would have been a good story. I hope they do well because I like Jed Finch and I want him to do well. It just feels like, when you look at the Big Ten, let's take a quick look at the Big Ten again. I'm going to go through the top 25 here in a second as well. I think this is where I was. Yeah. By the way, the Big 18, let's figure out how to count here, right? So, I mean, you think about the newcomers in. USC looked good, but I still think USC is going to have their troubles. They did move up to into the poll, up in the poll this week. One of the bigger movers. Maybe Penn State's year to finally get into the. They have not yet played in a Big Ten championship game. Ohio State's going to be good. Oregon, I still think, is going to do better than Washington. They struggled with Idaho last week, but I like their chances. Iowa, Iowa's going to play boring football, but they stay in games. Kirk Ferentz is the longest tenured coach, at least in the Big Ten, maybe in the country. And there'll be a surprise. Nebraska. If there's a surprise team in the Big Ten, watch out for Nebraska. Matt Rule's a really good coach. He may have found a quarterback in and his true freshman who played really well last week. Now, again, I understand they're playing the Little Sisters of the Poor. I get it. They're going to get a test this week with Colorado. I think they beat Colorado at home. Deion gets a comeuppance. So let's take a look at the top 25 as it stands. I mean, so by the way, BC gets and Bill O'Brien get the distinction of beating a top 10 ranked team, which they have not done a lot of in their history. I think 5 times, maybe. That's it. I could have that number wrong, but it's not a lot. But that's only because they didn't re-rank the teams after week 0. So Florida State stayed in the top 10 after losing. Georgia stays on top. They get 57 of the 62 first place votes, as they should. Ohio State gets the other 5. Both teams played exceptionally well. Obviously, Georgia played a better team, theoretically, a better team than Georgia played last week. I haven't seen, is Rick with us tonight? But Georgia played tremendous. Ohio State played tremendous. But Ohio State's got a lot of pressure on them. Ryan Day, if they don't succeed now, they went out of $20 million spending spree here, basically, when NIL money and other ways they have to spend money now to bring players in. They brought in Will Howard from Kansas State. They brought in Caleb Downs, a great cornerback from Alabama, amongst other players, a kid from Mississippi, running back. It's do or die for Ryan Day. He needs to get the national championship game, I think, or he's going to be in trouble. Texas stays. They move up a spot to 3rd. Alabama moves up a spot, already 4th in the country. And this team could stumble early someplace. It won't be this week. Get South Florida. I think they're going to put a hammering on South Florida. But Caleb DeVore's team, I think, will get better and better. And Joe Milroe is built for Caleb DeVore's offense. Notre Dame, again, this is the type of game Notre Dame's had trouble winning through the years, I think. A&M ranked. They're on the road. Tough place to play. No matter what you might think about Texas A&M or Mike Elko or the talent on that team, College Station is not an easy place to go play, especially at night. There's a lot of places around the country like that. And Notre Dame went in there and found a way to win. They didn't play pretty, but you find a way to win those games. Notre Dame has got a really good shot at going undefeated. And I know they're not respected by Rick and some other people. They don't think the coaches is up to snuff. I do. And maybe they won't get tested during the season, which will hurt them potentially in the playoff. And they also aren't going to have an opportunity at a bye because they don't play in a conference. They could be the number 1 team in the country and they're going to get the 6th seed. Ole Miss romped last week. I would expect them to romp again this week. They're 40-point favorite. I believe Lane Kiffin's not going to take the foot off the gas pedal. Oregon struggled. They dropped 4 spots to number 7. Not a big deal. Again, we got a 12-team playoff. None of these week 1 games, except Florida State now, who's now lost twice. Shame on me. I came up with all the reasons why you didn't need to worry about that first loss, right? And now it matters because they got 2 losses and 2 losses in the conference. Even more importantly. Missouri, who I mentioned before, is Penn State's number 8. They stayed at 8. Missouri moves up 2 spots to 9. Michigan falls, despite winning. They fall a spot to number 10. I think you're going to see them fall a lot further this week after they get shellacked. Let me get a couple of comments in here before we. Oh, you did comment on the fantasy. Gee, that's. What was that? 10 minutes ago? I'm supposed to remember that. Thanks for coming back, Rick. Oh gosh. I'll go back to the top 25 here in a second, get to some of your comments. With the NIL becoming what it is, do you think coaches will start to see smaller contracts? Well, shorter ones. I don't think the money is going to disappear. But I think you might see him sign shorter ones. And Mel Tucker Mel Tucker is a great example of why, you have one great year, you have a couple, you hit gold with some transfers, and you have a really, really good year. And well, there's some other factors going on there as well, but, Mel Tucker basically got fired for his on-field performance, not for, his wherever else performance. So that's a cautionary tale. So I think with all the NIL money and by the way, don't forget, there's not just NIL money. These teams have got $21 million, and not just football. This has got to be spread out over everybody. But they've got here's your pot of money, your salary cap, if you will, to go out and spend it just to pay kids to come to school. I'm not giving it to them without them guaranteed or staying. I'm going to pay some quarterback $1 million to come to my school, and ABC State is going to give him $2 million the year after, and he's going to leave. I'm not doing that. Dylan Gabriel will have a better year this year than Bo Nix did last year. I agree. I think Dylan Gabriel's a better quarterback. I think Bo Nix is not going to do well in the NFL this year. I don't think. I've had some, debate on maybe he'll be fine. I don't know. But I do think Dylan Gabriel is a better quarterback than Bo Nix, and he's another guy in that Heisman race that I just talked about. Gabriel had a great year last year at Oklahoma, for the most part. So yes, definitely Dylan Gabriel, another great guy. BYU at SMU Friday. That'll be a good game with Green Bay and Philadelphia in Brazil. Let's go back to this top 25 here. Left off at number 11, Utah, who I like to win the Big 12. They're up a spot, as I said, to number 11. Miami with a big move from 19 to 12. This is the AP poll, by the way, which is the one we focus on until we have a playoff poll. Miami was just, and I've fallen for this a couple of times. It feels different this year. I don't know why. But I have them on the games to watch this week only because Florida A&M, this is classic place for Miami to stumble. Coming off a huge win against an interstate rival. Be careful. But Cam Ward is the real deal. Another great quarterback. Another guy being Heisman chat. He can do it all. Man, he's good. And Fernandez, the transfer running back, played very well as well, and that defense was exceptional. Or Florida was awful, or a combination of both. USC, biggest mover of the week, up 10 spots from 23 to 13 with that surprise win against LSU. Brian Kelly needs to just own up the fact that, the coaching staff didn't do their job. Don't go in the press conference, bang your hand on a table, and blame the kids because they're celebrating on the sideline when you let the game get away. Not the kids, you're calling the plays. That game was in hand. And Brian Kelly has a habit of losing these games early in the season. First game, specifically. Tennessee, we get a nice matchup this week with Tennessee and North Carolina State. Tennessee moves up a spot to 14. Oklahoma with a big performance last week, up one spot. Oklahoma State up one spot to 16. Kansas State up one spot to 16. LSU drops 5 with the loss to USC. USC's defense, by the way, was exceptional. I think giving up 20 points to a really good LSU offense is certainly an improvement. I would like to have seen a little bit more pass rush out of USC. They didn't put much pressure on the quarterback, but the defense played much better when you consider what they've done the last couple of years there. And even before that at Oklahoma, if we want to, track Lincoln Riley back that far. Kansas up 3 spots to number 19. Arizona up 1 to 20. Iowa with a big win, 40 points. McNamara, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 250 yards passing. That doesn't sound like much, right? First time an Iowa quarterback has done that since 2021. In a in a game where passing is, not that hard. Anyway, they're up. They're up 4 spots. Number 21, Louisville unranked last week. Or 22, Georgia Tech unranked gets ranked for the first time in quite some time. Coach Brent Key with 2 nice wins now. They beat Georgia. They beat last week. Who did they beat last week? Georgia State. I was going to say Georgia Southern. I think beat Boise State beat them, I believe. Anyway, they're unranked. They're now 23rd. What the hell's going on here? I hate it when these commercials pop up on my screen. North Carolina State stays 24th. They had a little struggle, a little unexpected struggle, but I think they'll be fine. Nice game against Tennessee this week, as I mentioned. Clemson, with a testy game against Appalachian State at home, they drop 11 spots, almost fall out of the top 25. They will next week. Not only did Florida State, by the way, drop from the rankings, Florida State, they were 10th. They didn't get a single vote. Not one single vote for this poll did Florida State get. Mike Norvell made a bad choice, it looks like, in DJ Ukulele. Sorry, I can't say his name. Ugaladawa. I'll try to say it. Ugaladawa? Not even close. And Texas A&M fallout. They were number 20. The closest, the next few that are close, Texas A&M, they're at 26, basically. BC with another win this week would probably get in there if somebody falters. Boise State, who I like a lot, very close. Iowa State, who gets Iowa. An early season interstate matchup between Iowa and Iowa State. Memphis gets 27 votes. Nebraska's close there. SMU, Washington, Liberty. That'll be a very interesting season for sure. Robert Warney, how are you, Robert? Good to have you with us. Not sure if Robert's been with us before, but we welcome you. He's got a feeling about Mizzou making it to the Natty and winning it this year. Listen, it's a very good team, as I mentioned before. Last year they played very well. Just they would have been very close to possibly making a 12-team tournament last year, Robert. Had their chances to actually win the SEC and lost a couple of tough games. They played Georgia tough for a while. The SEC is wide open. I expect Missouri was I've got 5 teams from the SEC in the tournament. Missouri actually wasn't even one of them. And it's quite possible they get in. It's quite possible that somebody will falter that I liked, Robert. And it's quite possible that 6 teams get in from the SEC. That's how good this league is. I don't have my picks right in front of me, but I can go to the conferences. I mean, if I had to say right now, I know I've got Alabama in, I've got Georgia in, I've got Mississippi in, I've got Texas in, and I had maybe it was no, I know I had 5 teams. I'm missing somebody here. Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas. I'm missing 1 team. Maybe it was LSU. Let me find I got my sheet here somewhere. But listen, you're not wrong, Robert. Are you a Missouri fan? If you're a Missouri fan, we like you. This is a good team. We like you anyway. We like all the newcomers. Welcome to the show. I should keep these things a little bit closer at hand so I know where the hell they are when I need them. I hang on to them, and then I hang on to too much other stuff, and I can't find what I wanted. Larry Sorensen notes. Here we are, right here. Jesus, did I say Georgia? I also had FSU in, so that tells you what I know. Boise State, Alabama, Oklahoma. Missouri. I have them in as the 5th team in out of the SEC. So There you go. Welcome to the show, though, Robert. Glad you're here. Are you? Is that your area? Is that your team, or is it just a feeling you have about them? And who is your team? If not, glad to have you with us. Hope you'll continue to pop in. Looks like you're with us tonight on YouTube. I was going to say HBO. I have no idea why. Anyway, Tanner's been out there. Linda's been out there. John Gonzalez from the Sports Authority has been out there. I did a horrible job at the opening. I didn't welcome you guys watching on Facebook or YouTube, the TGI Sports Talk feeds. We're also live on Roku on the National Streaming Sports Network. You saw the ad for Bet Us. If you're going to bet, please do it responsibly. Go to the Northeast or the National Streaming Sports website at NEESP dot you know what. Oh my God, I'm having a bad night. And go to Bet US. Bet Us, you can do lots of stuff there. Lots of future bets. Any sport you want to bet, just do it. You saw the commercial that we played at the beginning. They're a big sponsor of National Streaming Sports. Also, Ralph Williams at RW Media, we want to give a shout out to. I was on the show yesterday, the Sports Corner, which was back yesterday. He does that show with Smoke and Jim Frazier. Had a lot of fun with them yesterday. They're on 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern time on Facebook and YouTube, and they're soon to return to the radio. So be looking for that. I'll be posting news about that soon. John Gonzalez, who I can see has been in today in the Sports Authority, is one of the great groups that helps us out on all the sports. The Bottom Line sports with Flo and the gang, Golf Buds, sports of all sorts with Ken Krause, and it goes on, and we'll keep some of these groups, and any groups that come in, I always give them a shout out. So please make sure you say hi, and we'll give you a plug. And DDH, thumbs up. Almost forgot that. DDH, thumbs up. Bet Notre Dame responsibly. I think I told you between some freebies on Bet Us and also some other unnamed sources. I ended up getting a $300 wager for $100, and it went on a future bet of Notre Dame winning the national championship plus 2,200. So come the end of January, just before we head out to the Caribbean. We're going away in October, by the way, so we'll miss a few. I don't know if we'll miss a couple of we'll miss one Wednesday. I think that's it. And we often try to go live from the cruise ship as well. And we'll try to do that in February as well. But in February, we hope to be going with $6,600 extra in our pocket, which won't last long. Diamonds, That show with Ralph was good yesterday. Ralph does some good stuff. I think he's better, quite frankly. I don't know if Ralph's with us tonight or not. I think he's better in this format where we're on this way than he was when he had the radio show. I think this format is really, really good for sports podcasting and sports casting. You get the audience involved. You have questions, and hopefully he's going to do something where if I were, again, Ralph, I would certainly do the radio show, but I would simulcast it to Facebook and YouTube affiliates so you can still take comments and whatnot. That's what I would do if some radio station wanted to put me on tomorrow. I don't think we hit Aruba. We cruise, and we're going out. Well, we're going out to New York in October, which we went out of in February, by the way. It was awesome going out of there in February, leaving the cold weather, getting down to the warm. That was a lot of fun. But we're leaving from New York on the Venecia the end of October, and we're back Election Day. Maybe I should come back after Election Day. Yeah, but I can't tell you our itinerary. I never can. So we travel in October and February. February we're out of I believe we'll be out of Miami in February. That'll be a 2-week cruise. This is 11 days, 2 weeks in February. Next September, we're leaving out of Miami on a little bit more than 2-week cruise. We're going to Barcelona, and then we're going to spend a little time in Barcelona while we're there. So a lot of fun to be had there. Yeah, now I won't put a down payment down. I got to get the $6,600 in my hand first. I'd be retired right now if I could just cash in the diamonds. Getting back for the start. Yes, getting back for the start of the Civil War. I think it's important to be there. I don't want to be in the front lines, but I do want to be around watching. And we won't go down that road today. What else is going on in the world of college football? We talked about Dabo, and oh my God, ACC is wide open. SEC is going to be a monster, right? I mean, gosh, Vanderbilt. Listen, don't underestimate the fact that Vanderbilt beat one of the teams that people were talking about as a sleeper in the ACC, and they might still be. It's just week 1. Vanderbilt took it to Virginia Tech, got out in front of them by a couple of touchdowns. Virginia Tech came back, not only tied the game, but went ahead, and Vanderbilt comes back and wins the game. They're not going to win many games in the SEC, though. SEC for sure. You may not be kidding, actually, AC. God only knows what's going to happen. Maybe I'll see how things are leading up, and I might not come back. Let's see what else is going on in the world of college football. Oh, by the way, Billy, we talked about Billy Napier in Florida, and Billy Napier's, there's no way he's going to survive this season. He better win these next couple of weeks, because it's going to get really tough for him the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season. And stop. You don't trash the fans. Don't trash fans when you're not doing well. That's like 101 coaching. He was talking about the fans and telling his players after the game. He says, "Well, I tell my players not to worry about some guy in his basement on social media, and I'll talk about the guys in the basement, Billy. You go coach football." Chris didn't tell me what cheeses were. Where's Chris? Where's Chris F. Grave? You never told me what the cheesies were. Texas Tech survival was hilarious. Let me take a look at that game. I got to refresh my memory on what happened with Texas Tech, who I do not consider. He's one of the few teams in the Big 12, I think, is not going to contend for a championship. Oh, by the way, UCF with a big victory. I've said this before. There's a sleeper in every conference, right? UCF is one of my sleepers. KJ Jefferson was really good in Gus Malzahn's offense in his debut last week. They played Houston. No, they didn't play Houston. That was UNLV. Again, not a big name team, playing a Little Sisters of the Poor, but they played very, very well. Watch out for UCF here. Texas Tech, let's see. Let's check out what they did. Oh, they had Abilene Christensen, right? 52-51. Listen, I don't like to berate any of these teams, but you got to go to overtime to beat Abilene Christensen, who plays below FBS level, unless they moved up and I'm not aware of it. You can't. I wish I had the over in that game. Game was over at halftime. They fell behind in this game several times. What was the score? They were up 32-21 at halftime. They went into overtime after Abilene Christensen scored 17, outscored them 17-6 in the fourth quarter, and then they had to survive in overtime with a missed extra point attempt. So lots of offense in this game. If you like offense, this was a game to have on. I don't see Texas Tech. If you're going to play this type of defense, they're going to get hammered in the Big 12. I think Big 12 is wide open. What rookie quarterback that are going to start this coming week in the NFL do you think are going to do good, and which do you think are going to do bad? I don't want to get into too much of that. I'll do it only because they're coming out of college, but I don't want to focus on the NFL too much during this show, AC. But since they're just out of college, the guys I think Caleb Williams is a real deal. I think Caleb Williams will do very well. Who else is starting? Jaden Daniels, I think, is going to struggle maybe early, but we'll be fine. I don't know if there's any other rookies starting, actually. Is there? I don't think there are. Drake May's not starting for a good reason behind that horrendous Patriot offensive line. We obviously know Michael Penix won't be starting for 4 years when he'll be 35 years old by then. Trying to think, is there another? McCarthy's hurt. Oh, Bo Nix is starting. I think Bo Nix struggles. I think Denver finishes last in that division again. So, again, I don't want to get too much into the NFL because we try to focus on the college game here. And but the question's a little bit relevant because they aren't that far removed from college. This is their first game since they were in college, for sure. So we'll let that be. Caleb Williams, I'm going to tell you, is a real deal. I don't know why a lot of people. I've had this conversation with Mac McGrath a few times now on National Streaming Sports, and he thinks Caleb Williams will be one of the biggest draft busts in history. Well, there have been some huge, and by the way, some guys are just great college players and don't translate to the next level. I talk about this all the time. I'm not going to berate great college quarterbacks. Tim Tebow was not a good NFL quarterback by any stretch of the imagination. Top 5 college players of all time, Tim Tebow's there. Caleb Williams, though, is not going to be, Brian Leaf bad or Jamarcus Russell bad or, Tony Mandarich bad. I mean, just can't. This kid, I don't think he can miss. And I think the Bears are a sleeper. So, again, enough NFL, but I mean, it's a great point, though, because we talk a lot. There have been a lot of great college players in general who their game doesn't translate to the next level. Not fast enough as a running back or a wide receiver, not big enough, not a quick enough release, not a strong enough arm to survive in the NFL as a quarterback. Doesn't mean you weren't a superstar college player. Lots of them. Archie Griffin, I think, is in the top 5. I've got him number 1 as the best college football player ever, back-to-back Heisman trophies. And again, that's a debatable topic, one we can certainly talk about. We've done it a few times here. And, he had maybe a couple of decent seasons in the NFL, but he was never as great. Doesn't diminish what a great college player he was. A lot of times we have these conversations and we kind of put them down. Yeah, but he couldn't make it in the NFL. So what? We talk about certain schools don't put out great quarterbacks. So what? That's not their job. Their job is to win college football games and be the best they can. John Cappelletti, one of the great college stories of all time, Heisman Trophy winner. Not a good pro player. Are you in Canada? Doodles are cheesies as well. I love cheese doodles, but I'm such a mess after I eat them. My face and my hands. I look like my granddaughter. Happy birthday to Merle Hunter. Didn't crack the bigs until he was 38. Graduated from Brookhaven High School. Only one to succeed from there. Lived long. Died in 1997. 108. I'll sign up for that. That gives me 44 more years. I'd still have a third of my life left. Well, I hope I have a third of my life left now. Stop drinking. I don't drink that much. It's funny, I get comments a lot. People are, you're always out drinking. Well, it's because when we do go out, I have 2 beers and I take a picture of my beer. The beer and my wife. I always get a picture. If you follow me on social media, when I go out, that's what you get. If I'm out with friends, you might get them too. But there's a certain group of friends I get out with, and it's like we're 20 years old, 25 years old, whatever. Whether it's out to dinner, whether it's on a cruise ship, whatever it is, my liver is giving me hell. Let's look at some questions that were presented from this last week. Teams that are in trouble didn't look good. We talked about already. I don't think they need to go into that. We talked about Florida's issue, all right? They keep cycling through coaches. And again, for whatever reason, they think they're a football factory there. And when they had 20 good years. And from the time, it's hard to believe. But I'm pretty sure they went through maybe just one coach between Spurrier and Meyer. It was Ron Zook, and maybe then it was Meyer. But they cycled through. Urban Meyer stepped down in 2010. Between him and Napier, they had three coaches, and Will Muschamp, who was a can't miss. Jim McElwain, who was can't miss, came from Colorado State, and Dan Mullen. None of them made it to a fourth season or past a fourth season. I believe Mullen made it the furthest. He was in the middle of his fourth season. And now Napier's about to fail after his fourth season, right? And Napier had all the makings of being a really good coach. He coached under Nick Saban at Alabama. He had really good success in the Sun Belt Conference at Louisiana. I think he won 40-10 or 40-12 or something. But it's been one misstep after another since he's been there. He went 6-7 with a top 5 NFL quarterback in Anthony Richardson. The year after, his defense was terrible. Now their pressure's on them to win. Plus they've got this lawsuit going on from Jaden Rashada over NIL money that he wasn't paid, and that's still hovering around him. Napier and the school, I think, have been named in that lawsuit. Which, by the way, if you don't think, by the way, if you're one of those people who don't think the schools have control over where the NIL money goes, this is a perfect example of yes, they do. And interestingly enough, if he's still around when they play Georgia later this season, Jaden Rashada is now the backup quarterback at Georgia. So, Samuel Dean, how are you? Football tomorrow. Engel, can you dig it? I can dig it, Mr. Dean. Good to have you with us tonight. I should go through poker nights. Oh, yes. What I haven't done, let me do, and before we get into any of the games from this week, I want to get into some of the games from this week and see what other stories are out there. Well, we didn't recap, and I don't know who everybody is. So recapping the college football pool. We have, how many teams do we have in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We got 11 people entered. 2 people didn't enter any. I know Danny had trouble getting picks in. He's got to be one of these guys. It's hard for me to tell them because some people don't put in their names. And I know it looks like Poppy's picks, I'm going to guess, is Kenny Gifford. He's got 1 win. So he's able to get 1 game in. At the top, though, is Scott Kobe and myself at 8-2. Also, ESPN fans, I don't know who that is, picks 1. You can tell me if you're here with us who that might be. They're 8-2. The Sports Nut, who I'm not sure who that is 7-3. The Dogs, which I'm going to guess is Rick Sherlock, is 7-3. Good job, guys. Paul's, which I'm going to guess is Paul 7-3. Beamer Ball, which I'm going to assume is Nick Bush or Neil Bush, 6-4. And then we got another ESPN fan. That's just it's like a generic name they give your team, 4-6. I don't know who a lot of these guys are. If guys want to speak up, get in there and you can change your team name, guys, to something we can recognize. That would be helpful. But there's where we stand after week 1. Don't forget to get those picks in for week number 2. And we got pro football tomorrow, as Sam Dean says as well. Samuel Dean. By the way, Sam does, if you want, I always say, Sam, the guys who come on from other shows, you want to plug your show, you're more than happy to do it. So I'm more than happy to do it. Just put some information in there and we'll put it up for the guys. Sam, I know, is on Let's Talk Sports, does some stuff with Alan Perales, who's always been a good friend of this show, one of the originals, if you will, or close to it, along with Rick and Billy and Kenny and some others. We've had some great followers through the years. We're approaching 2,500. And you guys have been tremendous, as I've told you so many times. But Sam, if you want me to promote something, you just put it up there, buddy. Let me go through some of these other questions and see if we have touched on them or not. Who pleasantly surprised us? USC definitely surprised us. Miller Moss was really good in that USC offense. I think they've got another top-notch quarterback. I don't think he's going to be as good as Caleb Williams, but who knows? And I think the defense was really good. Again, the inability to pressure Nussmeier for LSU is the only concerning thing I saw there. We don't care about that one. What's most realistic step for Dabo Swinney? Is he going to accept the NIL and start spending money? Is the school going to make him do it? Or are they going to fire him and bring somebody else in there? I don't see Dabo getting fired. I really don't. But I think we may have seen the end of Clemson, and we may have seen, the peak of what Dabo Swinney and Clemson can do. I mean, what we're seeing now reminds me a lot of the end of Bobby Bowden, although he had a much longer contention streak, if you will. Reminds me a lot of that, or at least his final 10 years or so at Florida State, or Les Miles at LSU, the end of that. It's a program that's at top and they gradually deteriorate because they don't seem to adapt to the changing landscape. Again, I don't like the changing landscape. I hate it. But I'm not getting paid to win football games either. And you've got to be able to adapt or you die. And what we're seeing out of Dabo and Clemson is probably more the norm than, say, Tom Osborne at Nebraska, or more recently Nick Saban at Alabama. And I don't know, I just don't think Dabo's ever gonna leave. I found it interesting. He was asked this week too about the Alabama job, and he did not answer the question whether he was offered the job. He said, we're concentrating on this. I believe Dabo Swinney was offered the Alabama job and said no. And then went to Caleb DeWart. I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, there's no reason not to say I wasn't offered the job. I have a job and I wasn't offered that job. He said, I'm not going to answer any questions. So, it's very interesting too. Speaking of Clemson and Florida State and their travail so far this year, it's very interesting that this happens at the same time they're trying to break away from the ACC. I mean, the ACC is not going to be able to claim any damages if they leave because there was no value being left on the table. I don't care about any of these questions here. If you submitted questions, I apologize. We got here coming up on 2 years ago. What's that? What's coming up on 2 years ago? Poker nights? What was I talking about, CA? In any event, you can fill me in on what was 2 years ago. AC says, does LSU have to win out to get in the playoffs now? Win out? I don't really know. A two-loss LSU team could probably still get in. I didn't have them in the playoff to begin with. But why don't we take a quick look at their their schedule here, and then we'll make we'll make a call because I want to see who they're going to lose to before we make that call. They're going to win this week. They're going to win at South Carolina. They're going to win against UCLA. They're going to win against South Alabama. I'm going to leave that Ole Miss game out for a second. They'll probably win at Arkansas. I think they win at Texas A&M. I think they lose to Alabama. I think they beat Florida. They'll beat Vanderbilt. And I think they beat Oklahoma. It gives them 10 wins and 1 loss, and I've got Ole Miss here. I think they can lose to Ole Miss. I'm sorry. That would be 9-2. I had them losing to Alabama. I think they can lose to either Ole Miss or Alabama and still get in the playoff, especially if they're in the ACC, if they're in the SEC championship game and lose, they'll get in for sure. That's a no-brainer. The team that loses that game is getting in. I think a 2-loss LSU team could get in, assuming the other loss was either to Ole Miss or maybe better yet, Alabama. The eye test matters, and I shouldn't say that. The style points matter, right? So it matters who you lose to. It matters when you lose. I mean, the problem with that Alabama game is it would be late. They're probably better off losing the Ole Miss because that's in October, middle of October, and they've still got 5 or 6 games after that, plus potentially an SEC championship game. Potentially. I don't foresee them getting there. So I think a 2-loss team could get in. I don't think they're getting in, though. Is I guess my point. Let's see. Let's look at some of the big games this week. And here's the ones I jotted down. You got other games you're interested in this week, please throw them at me. And we'll go through some others if time allows. Texas at Michigan. We already talked about it. I think Michigan has fallen out of the top 25 this week. I think Texas could go in there and win by 3 touchdowns. It's possible. Michigan is not that good. Their offense got 263 yards at home against Fresno State. Fresno State was in this game with 9 minutes left with the ball and a 6-point deficit. Michigan ends up winning by 20 because they scored 2 touchdowns. One of them was a pick 6. That's not good enough. Thank you, AC. If we're talking about the LSU team. Problem is, they're probably going to lose one of those other games too, right? They could very well lose to Oklahoma, although that's at home. They could lose at Arkansas. They could lose at Texas A&M. They could lose. Again, I don't think they're good enough to say you throw the football out there and they're going to win. Other big games this week. Georgia Tech at Syracuse. If you're an upstate New York fan, I've said I think Syracuse can win 8, maybe 9 games this year and maybe put themselves in a position for an ACC championship game appearance because that league is wide open. As we've seen now, the top 2 teams over the last few years have been Clemson and Florida State, and neither one of them is nearly as good as they've been, and maybe worse than that. So teams like Syracuse, North Carolina State, maybe BC, Georgia Tech, Miami for sure, Louisville, all have an opportunity to make some hay here. Baylor at Utah. Baylor and Dave Aranda have got a lot to prove this year. They didn't have a good last year. You don't get a chance to stick around in college football anymore. You don't get to build a program for 5 or 6 years. Dave Aranda did a good job year 1, fell back last year badly. Utah, I think, is very good. Cam Rising with a great first game after sitting out all of last year with an injury. I think Utah wins big here, but Baylor's got a lot to prove. Iowa State at Iowa. Is that offense for real at Iowa? 40 points last week. I mean, it took them a month to score 40 points in the last 5 years. McNamara, who Kurt Friends tried hard to give his job away in the spring and the summer. He managed to hang on to it and had, again, as I said, he had what doesn't seem like a tremendous game given what we see week to week in college football these days. 250 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. But that's the first time an Iowa quarterback has done that since 2021. They get in-state rival Iowa State. One of the teams I think is in contention to win that Big 12 championship. I like Utah, but as I've said, I think there's 7 teams that can win there. South Carolina goes to Kentucky. South Carolina off a disappointing performance last week. Kentucky gets a win. Kentucky, tough place to play. Mark Stoops, as you know, one of my favorite coaches, always gets the most out of his teams. I think Kentucky's going to beat South Carolina here. I put Texas, as I mentioned a couple times during this show, I put Florida A&M and Miami on this interesting game list because this is the type of game Miami, falters during. They win a big game and then they go lose to Mississippi Valley State. I think Miami does torch this team, but they can't just go out there and sleepwalk. Cam Ward is a really good quarterback. Fernandez is a really good running back. 2 transfers that Marco Cristobal's finally got it right with these guys. Their defense is playing much better. I think Cam Ward keeps them in every game this year, and watch out for this team as being a playoff contender now. Tennessee and North Carolina State, teams with playoff aspirations. NC State could easily contend in that ACC. Grayson McCall is a very experienced quarterback. They had a bit of a tough go of it in week 1 against inferior talent. Tennessee had a big win last week. This will be an interesting matchup. I like NC State here, but I got to see a little more before I actually make a good call. Colorado goes to Nebraska. Deion is going to get his hat handed to him. Nebraska is getting better and better and better. Could be a sleeper to watch out for in the Big Ten if teams like Oregon or Penn State falter and can't get to that number 2 spot. Let's just assume Ohio State's going to be the number 1 seed going into the conference championship game. If teams like Oregon or Penn State falter, Nebraska could step up and be a surprise team in the Big Ten. So I'm excited to actually see that game. And Boise State at Oregon is a game that I'm very interested in. Oregon struggled all day last Saturday against Idaho. Boise State is my favorite among the group of 5. Theoretically, if they were to run the table or even have a great season and have 1 loss, say maybe to Oregon, lose to Oregon, run the table in your conference, win the conference championship, and you got a really, mediocre, let's say, ACC champion, or maybe a Big 12 champion, more likely ACC. It's possible Boise State gets one of the byes as the top 4 seeds. It's possible, not probable, but possible. So those are some of the games that I'm looking at this week. It's having interesting storylines. CA says LSU will now need to win the rest. They should and pull an upset to have a chance. All the ones they should win and pull an upset to have a chance. Well, again, the schedule doesn't favor them because they've got games. And fortunately, both these games are home. They got Ole Miss at home and they got Alabama at home. That's the toughest 2 games on their schedule. They probably should win the other games. And they got Oklahoma at home too. So the 3 toughest games in conference they have are all at home. That's helpful. They can't stumble. If they were to win, if they were to lose, and again, I think they're better off losing Ole Miss at this point because it's earlier in the season. They will need some style points, right? They would have to probably put a pretty good beating on Alabama to get back in it with 2 losses. But again, if they go to the ACC if they do run the table, the AC's question and kind of CA's follow-up here. Here's the thing that I didn't even take into consideration. If they do run the table and get to the SEC championship game, just because they're a runner-up, let's just say they don't run the table, but somehow get to the championship game, which I'm not sure they can do. I'm trying to do the math in my head. Without the divisions, it's hard for a team with 2 or 3 losses to get to the SEC championship game. You could have before. We've seen it. Same in the Big Ten. But now you can't do that. So LSU's got a difficult path. I mean, this doesn't look it. If they'd gone and lost 2 games, if they'd lost to Ole Miss and Alabama and beat USC, that wouldn't have mattered. They weren't getting in, probably losing those 2 games. They've got to win one of those 2 games. Wes Pruitt with us. Great to have you with us tonight, Wes. I think Wes could be a new viewer, and if you are, welcome. Tell us who you root for, Wes, and where you're catching us from. We're glad to have you with us. BC could be a sleeping giant. You know, they've had some good teams. I talked about this earlier in the show. We got about 10 minutes left or so, guys. I like Bill O'Brien. I mean, he did a great job at Penn State, turning around a bigger mess, obviously for different reasons at Penn State. BC's had some good teams through the years. Jack Bickle had some really good teams back in the 70s and the 80s, with especially the Doug Flutie years when they went to the Cotton Bowl. Never a national championship contender. Tom O'Brien had some good teams there when Matty Ryan was there, and we had a good friend of ours, son, played in front of Matty Ice on the offensive line, Josh Beekman. He had some really good teams. Couldn't quite get over the top. And obviously Matt went on to a better pro career than he had in college. He was a good kid. We used to sit with his dad at games a lot. Never did we foresee that, at least me, that he was going to become the great quarterback that he did in the pros. Unfortunately, he's got a loss to one New England Patriot team that will be hard to live down. Aranda's seat, I think, is more than warm, Wes. I think it's red hot. I think I went through Baylor's schedule here. I'll go back through it again. I don't see how this team is really going to. Here, I got to get back to them again. Hold on. I don't think this team's going to. I don't see them as a contender. I think there's 7 teams that can contend in the Big 12. I don't think they're one of them. I mean, and just 2 years ago, they were playing, in the SEC or the Big 12 championship game. They beat Tarleton last week. Okay, they're going to lose to Utah at Utah this week. I really think they lose to Air Force. Air Force is really good, well coached under Coach Calhoun. I always root for. I'm a big, and you'll always get the scores from me, and we'll look at who the academies are playing this week here in a second. I didn't jot those down. I'm going to say they beat Colorado. That gives them 2 wins. Lose to BYU, lose to Iowa State, beat Texas Tech, lose to Oklahoma State, beat TCU, lose at West Virginia, beat Houston, lose to Kansas. That's 5-7. He gets fired. If he's 5-7, he gets fired. I don't think there's any doubt about it. That BC team with Matt Ryan was one of the best BC teams in history. One of the best, but they weren't better than the Flutie team, though. I'm a little older than you, AC. You would have been probably, you said you were in your 40s, I think, early 40s, if I remember right. So you were just a kid when, because that was 40 years ago. You never forget that Flutie beating the Hurricanes. I want to say it was 1985, 1984. That team went to the Cotton Bowl. That was probably the best team. Jack Bickell was the coach then. Not BC team Ryan. Not BC team Matt Ryan. Not BC team with Matt Mason was one of the best. Now you got me confused here. You say the same thing here 3 times. I think I had it the first time. I got it the first time. You got to go. You got to party with a few guys that play defense on Matt Ryan's BC team, so I might have been a little biased. We had to run into each other there, AC. It was a lot of those games, those 3 years that Matt was there. He graduated with our friend Josh Beekman, and again, sat with his dad, who was an interesting cat, let me tell you. A very interesting cat. Let me take a quick look. I wanted to see where the military academies were this week, because we like to always give them their shout outs. Probably easier for me to do this by independence. So where's Army this week? Army is off this week. No, I'm sorry. Army's not off this week because they are now, I forgot, they're in the American Conference. Let's see who we got. Navy's got Temple at home, probably a win. Army is going to be at Florida Atlantic. Army with a nice opening win last week. Jeff Monken, one of the most underrated coaches in the country. I've said that for years. I think it's another win for Army. And then Air Force has, I don't think they had, what do you call it this week? I think they've got, let's see. Oh, they're not in the Big 12. Where are they? Mountain West, right? Mountain West. Let's see who Air Force has this week. Very underrated school. San Jose State, another win. I think 3-0 for the academies again this week. How about saying that? You were roaming around the dorms. I wasn't a student. Well, I wasn't either. I was legal. Were you legal drinking then or not? Let me see. That was around what? I'm trying to think of the years. 2000. 2002, I would say, right? Around 2001, 2002. Either 2001 to 2004 or 2000 to 2003. That sounds more right. 2000 to 2003. So you were 21. Yeah, you were probably legal drinking age, I would say. AC. No, you weren't. I will turn you in. I don't think they can. I think there's a statute of limitations for that. It was a fun place, man. We had fun. We were old already. You know, we were in our 40s. I was your age. I was your age then, and we still knew how to have some fun. About 20, so you're 20. So you're 44 now. That makes sense. That makes sense. So I was about your age then. We had a lot of fun. We went to a lot of those home games, and you can see behind me. It's a great stadium to watch a football game, guys. If you get a chance and you're up here in the Northeast, go and watch some games at Cherry Hill. I didn't hear back from Wes. Wes, I hope you'll let me know at some point where you're from and who you do root for, and I hope you do tune in. We're live on Wednesday nights with the college football huddle here on TGI Sports Talk. Friday morning, my guest, by the way, will be Reggie Williams on 101 with Keith Engle, former Bengal great, graduate of Dartmouth, one of the few great players to come out of the Ivy League. There's been some, obviously. I shouldn't say there's been none. But Reggie played at Dartmouth, was all Ivy League there, college football Hall of Famer, and a great player for a long time with the Cincinnati Bengals. And we'll have him on the 101 interview show on Friday. We'll do the Major League Baseball update at 3 p.m. on Friday. All live on Roku, by the way, and on the TGI Sports Talk social media outlets. And then, of course, we got the Sunday Stream of Consciousness on Sunday at 8:30, all Eastern time. Those shows are. And then we do our guest spot with Mac and Jack on Friday, the big football show on National Streaming Sports on Sunday, 8 o'clock. Both of those appearances are for about a half hour. And we also do an hour, 45 minutes to an hour with the National Streaming Sports show on Wednesdays before this show. So we have a lot of fun doing the show. You guys have been great again tonight. Big games this week. How much are we going to see? This season is going to be crazy. I'm telling you right now, I see up and downs for a lot of teams this year. I see that SEC. I see some of these leagues beating each other up. We aren't going to have one undefeated team. There'll be one, Notre Dame. Guys, have a great Wednesday night. We'll see you Friday morning with Reggie Williams. Keith Engle for TGI Sports Talk's College Football Huddle. Thanks for your participation. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Keith Engle out. Bye-bye.